Well, hello, everybody. This is Mike DeBoer with the Franchise Business Podcast, and I am honored to be joined today by Ben Terrill. Ben is someone that I've had the privilege of getting to know and building a relationship over the last few years in this franchising world. Ben, I'll let you introduce yourself, but Ben's a franchise consultant with FranNet, based out of St. Louis, Missouri. So Ben, if you don't mind just kind of, introducing yourself, what led you to, helping people pick the right business for them, and evaluating kind of themselves and their goals and dreams for their life as well. I think that'd be helpful for the listeners.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am a franchise owner within the FranNet system. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I work primarily in the Midwest, although I do work across the country.
Sure.
And I came at this and from kind of a unique perspective, I think. I'm from an entrepreneurial family. My father owned a business. My mother owned a business. My grandfather owned a business. Yeah. I did not own a business for the first part of my career. I was in sales and sales management, and ultimately came to the realization that if I wanted to, get to the heights that I wanted to get to, professionally, really the way to do that is to be a business owner. And I was working with a business coach that sort of advised me to think about franchising as the means to that end. And I wasn't familiar with franchising beyond, fast food and retail.
The stereotypes, yeah.
Yeah, we all know that, right?
Yeah.
And so I was pointed towards the owner of the FranNet office in St. Louis as somebody that I should go talk to, which I did. And what was funny was he was asking me great questions and getting me to think about a lot of things I hadn't thought about, and really going through the process of discovery of what are your goals and what do you like and what do you not like. But what's funny about it is he showed me some great brands, but I was enjoying the process so much.
Right.
I mean, I was having my weekly calls with him, and I was enjoying those calls almost for the process of the call more than the actual things he was showing me, even though I liked those. And so I finally said to him, well, how do I do what you do?
Right.
And he said, funny that in about a year, I want to sell this FranNet office.
Wow.
So I wound up coming on board as his associate and then later buying the office from him. And so I have been in the realm of being a client. I mean, I was a FranNet client. I was somebody who was, 40 years old and wanting to be on my own and wanting the process of learning, what's out there.
Sure.
And that brought me to FranNet, and then ultimately it brought me to buying the FranNet office. Wow. So that's my background. I mean, it's sales and sales management. For college, I had an advertising degree. I was in advertising and marketing, and that led to sales.
Right.
But ultimately, all the roads led to entrepreneurship.
Very cool. Well, I'm sure that allows you to relate a lot to the people that you're working with because you've been in their shoes and you come from a family of entrepreneurs. So I'm sure that helps you kind of bridge, the relation and the conversation you're able to have with people. And that's a natural segue, Ben, because you're working with these people. I think the franchising world, as we both know, is big. There's a lot of models out there. There's a lot of, I think, uncertainty about what franchising really means because of the stereotypes that we alluded to. So when you're working with people, what is your process like to understand them, their dreams, their goals, their abilities, and then kind of guiding them through this process of, okay, I want to see what's out there for me?
Absolutely. Well, that's a great question because franchising is, the franchising world, people think they know what it is. Yeah. You talk to anybody on the street and they'll say, oh, well, McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and the car washes and retail establishments. But franchising is a lot bigger than that. And what I tell people that come to me that are curious is too many people take what I would call the vending machine approach. And what, you know what that means. You have $2 in your pocket and you are somewhere and you have 10 minutes to eat lunch and you go to a vending machine and you're like, well, I could get the cookies or the chips or the sad little piece of fruit. Right. And that's how I will decide my lunch. And that's how people think, well, I'm going to Google around for a minute and I'm going to look for brands that I recognize and I'll find something. Right. And that's not the right way to select a franchise to invest in. You have to understand who you are. The very first thing you have to do is understand who you are. And to that end, we have a process that I follow where we start with a conversation. Who are you? I mean, even more than what are your goals? I mean, that's even the second step. The first step is how do you like to work? How do you think about things? What is your style? What is your way of thinking and interacting with people? What's important to you about the people you're around? And so we have an assessment that people take online to answer those questions. That's the high level piece.
Right.
Who are you who are you at a fundamental level, and then after the assessment, it's another deeper conversation where we go through. We call the process building a business model,
Okay.
and it's asking preferences on a wide variety of questions. What about the maturity of a business?
Right.
That's the kind of question that people don't automatically think about, but it's important. What about the type of employees that you would want to have around you? And maybe that means no employees, but there's that question. There's the question of the sales process. How are you comfortable selling? Do you enjoy it? Do you not enjoy it? Do you want a brand that relies less on direct selling? What about the business environment? What about the image of a business? What is your time commitment? I mean, maybe it's a semi-absentee, maybe it's an got-owner-operator. All of that comes before I even talk about industry, which is the first thing most people think about. But I got to have all that background, and then the industry, ultimately the budget, the timeline, whatnot. But my point in all of that is that the smartest way to go through a due diligence search is to go through it in a methodical way where you're answering fundamental questions about yourself, and then you're building on that. And then ultimately I'm to a point where I can look for ideas to bring back to the client based on what I've learned. And it's not just, well, I sure love sandwiches. Okay, well, here's 3 sandwich shops. I mean, you might love a sandwich, but that doesn't mean you should run a sandwich shop, and maybe you should. I don't know, but that's not the reason. I mean, the fact that you like the sandwich shop isn't the reason,
Right.
and so it builds on itself, but it is a process, and it's a serious process. And then ultimately, when I show franchise brands to a client, and we talk through what they each are all about, and then I of course advise them to select 1 or 2 of maybe I show them 4, 5, 6 things,
Right.
Which things are really tripping your trigger, and
Sure.
then set them up to have an introductory call with a brand.
Right.
And then the due diligence continues on from there, but
For sure.
it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things you said there, sometimes I think if someone's doing this on their own, they think that my passion has to be the business that I get into, or my hobby, or my interest, right? But that's often not the case. That might actually ruin that hobby or interest that you have. Rather, you should be passionate about building a business and maybe managing people, or not, providing a great service to clients and making an impact in your community. I think what I find from my side of this world is, sometimes you might be wrong in your thinking about what your passion is. It's not that thing. It's building a business, and that can be done in a bunch of different avenues. And then you help them figure out which model allows them to do that, right?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, if you've read the E-Myth books, there's a story in there of a woman who's a baker, and
Right.
she's a very talented baker, and she bakes cookies and cakes and pies, and she's wonderful. So she naturally thinks she should open a bakery. But then when she opens the bakery, she realizes that she has to do the HR and the insurance and the real estate and the marketing, and she has to hire a baker to bake when she is passionate about being a baker. And I'm like, that person maybe should be the best baker in the world for somebody else.
Sure.
Because building a business is a different set of tasks, set of things, and so I have my clients. I mean, one of the things that I always tell them is remember that you are, depending on the brand, every brand is different.
Right.
But many times you're not the one doing the thing. And so you have to enjoy the idea of the business enough to want to be in the industry, but it's more about, do you see a value in it? Do you see a market in it? Does it match all of your other goals? I had a client that said, I showed them an automotive franchise, and he said, well, I don't know how to rebuild an engine. And I'm like, well, good. You shouldn't be the one doing that if you know
Right.
the business,
Sure.
Otherwise you just bought yourself a job,
Right. Yeah.
So you're right. You have to separate the function of the business from the function of the business owner.
Yeah.
And it's not always about following your passion.
Sure, absolutely. And then the other thing, Ben, I mean, I think FranNet and you, a great ability you have is, being able to kind of decipher this world with thousands of franchise models that you guys then can vet, and then you can then distill that to, certain options that are good for the candidate and how you've evaluated them. So how important is that, being able to vet this big world with lots of different options into something palatable for them?
Tremendously important. So in the US, there are about 4,000 franchise systems. In Canada, there are another 1,000, I think, or something like that. So anytime you have a number that large, not everything's going to be a good business. I mean, and I tell clients, and just because something out there calls itself a franchise does not mean it's a good business. So the FranNet organization corporately vets franchise brands. We don't let every franchise brand into our inventory. In fact, we turn away more than we let in.
Right.
We curate around the idea of these are really going to be very strong brands, best in class, best in breed, whatever you want to call it. We don't overload with too many things from one industry. There are 50 home care businesses. Many of them are quite good. And just because something's not in our inventory doesn't mean it's automatically not a good business. I mean, there's some brands that don't work with people like us and whatnot. But my point is that we're not going to have 50 of anything in our inventory. We're going to have a small number.
Right.
And then in that way, we're going to try to broaden the availability of what we can show clients and what they can look through. But also, I would say the brands that we have are geared towards professional people that are used to having an income at a certain level and a corporate position at a certain level. And there's nothing wrong with inherently. There's nothing wrong with vending machines and little and businesses like that and delivery services, whatever. But there's some great like entry level businesses for people, but that's not who we work with, because our average buyer is a middle-aged corporate business person, and they're looking for a certain level of opportunity. And so that's what we look for too. I mean, we validate brands that come into our inventory to make sure that they're at the level that we know that our clients are looking for.
Right. Meet their expectations and their needs and their preferences. I completely get that, Ben. And so my next question is, I'm sure maybe not, and you've been lucky. You've had some maybe challenging processes with an individual where maybe they had a lot of misconceptions, or they just had a hard time evaluating themselves, or they were not open to maybe the things that you were showing them, whatever it might be. Do you have an example, without naming names, about a challenging client situation, but one that you overcame and you got them into the right business that they've been successful in since?
So I'm working with a gentleman that is he's just now actually signed up with a franchise system.
Okay, awesome.
And when he first started talking to me, I could tell that he was an analyst. I mean, he was the people, and he's been very, very, very smart and strong at the company where he worked at, but he was consistently going really far down rabbit holes of analyzing and analyzing and analyzing and analyzing and analyzing. And, whereas I think that serves him well, because he ultimately came to a really, really strong decision. But I was afraid for months that he was going to have paralysis analysis, where ultimately he was going to throw up his hands and say, I don't want to do this anymore, because, he was just being so methodical. He wound up, he looked at 6 or 8 different brands in 2 or 3 different tranches. Like, he
Okay.
started with 3 or 4, worked his way through those, always found something that he didn't love, put
Right.
it aside, asked me to do it again and again. I kept showing him things. I got to the point where I was really, I mean, if he'd asked me to show him one more brand, I was probably going to say, "Is this even what you want?" Like, in
Right.
general.
Yeah.
But luckily he did hit on something, and he there was a wonderful franchise system that we work with that had a very patient, very smart, very engaged representative that really understood it. And she and I talked about this guy like every week at least, if not
Sure.
a couple times a week for months.
Right.
But I think the lesson I drew from that is, people have different personality types, and somebody's an analyst, somebody's a really strong business corporate person. They can be a phenomenal franchisee, and
Absolutely.
this franchise brand is already telling me, "Oh my God, this guy's going to be one of our stars."
Right.
Hopefully, he will be.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you do have to kind of make a little bit of a decision in your gut. Like,
Sure.
you can analyze something to death,
Yeah.
and you can always find somebody that's unhappy,
Hmm.
or somebody that thinks they made the wrong decision, or
Hmm.
some little part of little business model that you don't like. Sometimes you have to take a little bit of a leap,
Yeah.
and you just have to go for it. Um, and luckily this guy did get to that point,
Right.
but I've also seen it happen the other way where people go way too fast. So that's another,
100%.
that's another story.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No,
this
you're
was
right.
fresh in my mind because it just happened literally.
Okay.
You know.
Oh, right. It's fresh. But I think you're right. I mean, it shouldn't be entirely an emotional decision, nor should it be an entirely a data driven decision. There's both. I mean, I need information to make a educated, decision for myself, but I also, there's a feeling here, right? If it's a good fit or not. And I do need there's a leap of faith, because nothing is guaranteed in life in terms of success. Like a lot of these people, I think, they weren't guaranteed to be good in their careers either, right? But they were, because they worked hard and they followed their training. And I think that if they carry that over to this business, they'll be great at it. But yeah, there's a leap of faith for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one other thing I've noticed, everybody is different, and you can't, we have a process at FranNet, and every franchise system has a process, but you always have to be a little bit adaptable,
Mhm.
because people come at things from different perspectives and different opinions and different styles. And that's why, the FranNet assessment, for example, puts people in various silos based
Right.
on exactly how they answer the questions. And
Yeah.
then, at least on the margins, that's going to affect the kinds of brands I show people. It's going to
Sure.
affect, the process that we go through, because, what one person will react to and feel comfortable with is going to be different from somebody else.
Right. 100%. Absolutely. And on the topic of stories, Ben, any other success story that you wanted to share about someone that has just been great in the model that you helped them find, and they've been a big success and a star, as we said, in that model?
Well, yeah. So I'm fortunate enough to have had a number of clients that have
Sure.
been successful. One that comes to mind is a gentleman a gentleman and his wife that bought a what I would call a light industrial franchise. So this
Okay.
is a brand that has um, taking away trash,
Okay.
rubbish control.
Right.
And he bought an area here in the St. Louis metro area that's very heavily industrial.
Okay.
So a lot of warehouses, a lot of manufacturing and whatnot.
Mhm.
And he really, and I knew that he was going to be strong with this. He was in the military,
Okay.
and so he's used to a system that is fairly rigid. And by the way, that's another question I ask people, is about how they, do they like an idea of something that's rigid versus something
Right.
that gives them more creativity. And he
Right.
liked the procedural sorts of things. And
Sure.
so, but he has gone gangbusters with this brand. And as a matter of fact, there was a tornado in St. Louis, I don't know, last year,
Right.
and they were the news stations were reporting from this Amazon warehouse that had gotten hit.
Okay.
And I looked with intense interest at the fact that all of the rubbish trucks that were parked alongside this warehouse. It had only been 2 hours since the tornado had hit this warehouse, and I talked to him the next day, or not the next day, a few days later, and he was like, "Well, they weren't even our client, but I saw the storm, I saw the damage, and we just went for it because we knew that they needed help, and we were just going to help them." And we were going to let the money and we were going to let all that happen later because we just wanted to be a good partner and a good community citizen. And I just thought, my gosh, I mean, what a wonderful person to be, thinking that I don't know, that way, in advance. And by the way, it gave him some really good publicity. Not the reason he did it.
No.
But on the other hand, that was a nice side effect. And, but he's been, I mean, he's a rock star in this system.
That's awesome.
It's a different kind of business because it's not something that most people would think of as a franchise,
No.
Rubbish removal with big, heavy dumpsters that are the size of your house. I mean, do you think of that as a franchise? I wouldn't have, but it is,
Right. And someone that, I mean, not on the surface the most glamorous thing, but again, something that can be built out, become very lucrative, and make an impact by doing the things that he's been doing. So I'm sure that drives you and really makes you fulfilled, Ben, is that you help people find that right thing for them and see them succeed in it.
Yeah. It made me feel really good, and I see their social media posts, and I always comment on them, and then they see my social media posts and they comment on mine, and I'm not gonna say that we're fast friends and we're lifelong best friends or anything, but we have a great ongoing rapport with each other because we valued the relationship that we had and the connection that we made, and I love it when a plan comes together, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. That's an awesome story. So my last thing is just give you the floor. I mean, if there's someone that's maybe watching this that is unsatisfied in their job or just thinking about kind of what's next, and that they're open to the idea of business ownership and maybe franchising as a path to get there, what would you say to them about how you can help or what they should be thinking about in this process?
Well, I guess I would start by saying that too many people have business ownership as sort of a dream, but it's really vague in their head. It's like, oh, someday I'd love to do that. And they never get there. Mm-hmm. And they get to the end of their career and they're in their 60s or 70s or 80s, and they say, gosh, if only I had. And I've heard that from family members. I've heard that from other people I know. There's no time like the present, and there's nothing wrong with exploring it. You dive in a little bit. I mean, having a phone call or 2 or 3 with me, I mean, it doesn't cost any money. I mean, my services are free. Right. So there's really no reason, if you're curious, not to think about it, not to investigate it a little bit. You can always start through the process and stop, but you have to start, or you're not going to get to the end if you really want to get to the end. And so I think people are tentative. They don't know what they don't know. They think it's daunting. And I would say franchise ownership is a really good way to be an entrepreneur and have some support and have some systems behind you. We think of entrepreneurship as this thing where you have to have this light bulb idea. All these kids going through MBA school, what's your business going to be? Well, I've created this app, or I've created this whole thing over here, or this system, or I'm Mark Zuckerberg and I created Facebook in my dorm room. I mean, those things are unicorns. A lot of people want to be in business, but they don't have that sort of light bulb idea, and so they never do it because they don't understand how to get into it. They don't think they have that idea. Franchising is a wonderful way for people to get into business because you're working for yourself, but you're not working by yourself. Right. And so I think many more people should investigate franchising. and maybe they investigated and they wind up not doing it, but at least they kind of dip their toe in the water and look around.
Yeah.
It does not have to be as daunting a prospect as someone might think. Now, getting into business is a serious thing, and
Of course,
you should not get into it if you're not serious and you're not willing to do it. But the process of getting there doesn't have to be as daunting as people might think. So if somebody watching this is curious, maybe they're like, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to do something. I'm tired of working for somebody else. I'm tired of somebody else making all the decisions in my life. I want to have more than 2 weeks vacation. I want to decide to go to my kid's soccer game. I want to take that trip to Europe next summer because I want to, and or I want to decide to work less hours or more hours. Being your own boss is kind of one of these really amazing gifts that those of us in free countries like the US and Canada can do. In other parts of the world, they can't do things like this. So take advantage of it and research and learn. And there's so much out there that is not obviously a franchise. Your franchise system comes to mind as something that is a beautiful service that people need, and they don't understand that the average person doesn't understand that industry even exists, much less that there's a franchise in expense reduction. I mean, my gosh, and so take some time, explore, think through who you are, go through the process, and magic might happen, and magic might not happen. You might get some of the way through it and decide not to do it, but what are you out if you
at least you tried?
At least you tried. At least you thought about it, and maybe you think about it and you decide it's not the right time, but then you've learned something, and then maybe you go away and you come back 2 years later. That's happened to me, and now, you know what, Ben, now I'm ready.
Right. Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. There's no harm in trying. And again, with the right methodology and resource like Ben and like what FranNet does for these individuals, it can be a lot less daunting and an enjoyable process. Like you said, you enjoyed it when you were going through it. I think a lot of people feel the same way when they're using you to make this decision and evaluate. So Ben, where can people find you if they do want to get in touch?
Well, they certainly can find me online. FranNet.com is the website. You can find my name in there.
Yeah.
If you're I can work with people all over the country, but also the beauty of FranNet is if you happen to be in a geographic area and really want somebody in your area, you can have that because FranNetters are all over the US and Canada. And so, but I'm of course happy to work with anybody. FranNet.com. My email address is bterrill@frannet.com. But so reach out to me. On the website, you can also find my phone number. I'm very accessible, and would love the chance to just talk to anybody. And I mean, even if it's just an introductory, what is a franchise? Give me 10 minutes on just
the basics,
very, very basic.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I've had conversations with people, that started out with just, let me explain my situation, and I don't know what you do, and let's just talk for a few minutes.
Sure.
And then they go away, and then sometimes they come back, and it's a process. So
yeah, awesome. Well, if people will be in good hands if they do want to work with Ben or any of his colleagues at FranNet. So Ben, I really appreciate you joining us. A lot of great insights and information that you've provided. So thanks for doing this.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate it too. And we love our partnership with Schooley Mitchell, and it's such a great service that your brand offers the people in your system. I mean, I've had countless experiences with Schooley Mitchell franchisees, and they've just done great. And that's a very interesting and somewhat unique type of business that proves the point we're making, that it doesn't have to be what you think it is. And there's great opportunity, sort of regardless of what kind of person you find yourself being. There are so many different ways you can go. So kudos to you and your team, and helping people get into business is what it's all about.
It is, absolutely. Well, thanks for saying that, Ben. Thanks a lot. And I hope you have a good day. And thanks everyone for listening as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Take care.